welcome to this occasional series of podcasts from Nordic Viola. I'm Katherine Wren, founder of Nordic Viola, and I'm going to be introducing you over the next 9 months or so to my latest project, On a Wing and a Prayer. The expression on a wing and a prayer means to do something in the hope that you will succeed despite being insufficiently prepared. And for me, it sums up humankind's current approach to the climate crisis. During the project, I'll be visiting Shetland, Deeside in the northeast of Scotland, and Morven in the West Highlands, working with composers Renzo Spiteri, Pete and Joe Stollery, and Lisa Robertson. Together, we'll be creating new music about our changing habitats and the species that are struggling. We'll also be incorporating some older tunes from the far north in our work and introducing you to Nordic composers whose work we feel complements ours. Our host for these podcasts will be composer and co-founder of the Ear to the Ground New Music podcast, Aileen Sweeney. So without further ado, I'll hand over now to our host today, Aileen Sweeney.
Hello, thank you, Katherine, for having me. So let me just introduce the two wonderful musicians that we have today. Firstly, we have Renzo Spiteri, originally from Malta, but now based in Shetland. He's a versatile percussionist, as well as a composer, improviser and sound multimedia artist who finds the sonic environment a powerful source of inspiration. And of course, you've heard from Katherine Wren there, who alongside her playing in the Royal Scottish National Orchestra formed Nordic Viola, as she mentioned there, a flexible ensemble promoting music from the countries encircling the North Atlantic. So to start off, I'm very intrigued to find out how your paths crossed.
So the first time we met was in September 2019. There was a conference in Shetland called Shurmal Conference, and I played a solo performance, and Katherine was there also to play and to present some of her work. And I actually played my first performance in Shetland, the solo performance, on the day that we moved to Shetland. So it was quite an eventful move. So, so there was a conference, my performance, and us moving to a completely new place. But that's where we met. Actually, me and Katherine were on the same ferry. I saw this lady carrying a viola on her back, and I was wondering whether she was Shurmal bound, and indeed it was so. That's where we first met.
I remember it was quite a journey, Renzo, as well, wasn't it, that boat? It was definitely a baptism of fire.
Indeed, yes, very stormy, very stormy, very windy crossing, but that was a good introduction to Shetland. I mean, I was here already in 2018 to work on a project, so I had already a pretty good idea what Shetland was all about before the actual move.
And what was it that made you decide to work together after that initial meeting?
I think for me, it was quite clear that we were inspired by similar things. We're both very inspired by nature and fascinated by the sounds around us, actually. And that, for me, came across really clearly in Renzo's music. And I remember listening to that performance and just being fascinated by the sounds that were coming out and how Renzo made so many sounds from the percussion instruments and blended that with electronics and live sounds. So, I kind of felt there was a connection between us straight away and a definite crossover, and also a potential challenge to working together as well, and that I would learn a lot from working with Renzo and develop my own practice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess viola and percussion, it's not the most common of ensembles.
Definitely not, no, although you'd be surprised. I did do a little bit of rooting around on Spotify to find some inspiration, really, and to find ways that we could put our sounds together. It's a challenging combination, that's for sure, but it opens a unique sound world, I think, and a lot of possibilities. So it's really interesting to work with.
Yeah, that's also because the viola is such a sort of linear instrument. It kind of opens these sort of possibilities where we can really experiment with sound textures and musical textures and space also, which both for myself and Katherine are very important elements within the music that we create. I think it gives that necessary space to see things evolving, and because both of us are very much involved also in improvisational moments, I think the setup offers that rich possibility too.
Yeah, no, it sounds amazing. I've loved what I've heard so far, and can't wait to hear more. So it was. Am I right in saying it was 2019 roughly that you met? So how did you sort of continue to connect and work together at that kind of tricky time just at the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, obviously we were keen to keep that connection going, and we had no idea in September 2019, as none of us did, of what would happen. And obviously it quickly became clear that we weren't going to be travelling anytime soon. I think also it was a time to be developing skills. So what we actually ended up doing was that Renzo sent me some tracks through as an inspiration, and then I improvised with those at home. I was just really starting to learn how to record at that point, so it was perfect in so many ways. It helped me connect with Renzo, it helped me develop my improvisation, but it also taught me how to record. So not only did I send Renzo tracks through for him to manipulate, but I learnt to layer up our work, and so we had a bit of a toing and froing of work that we created to bounce ideas off each other. I mean, it's not ideal, and it's not you can't do it in the moment, but it's also quite an interesting way of working, and also opens up a way of working long distance in initial stages, which I think is quite a new and important way of working, actually.
Yeah, and I also think that sort of that period laid the foundations for where we are now.
Definitely,
because we could take the time to send things back and forth, but also communicate our ideas until we finally got ourselves into the same room, and we could see what we wanted to use, what we wanted to shave off from what we've done, and to develop the ideas further, and to understand more what the rapport between our instrumentation is and where it can go.
Yeah, and we have actually ended up using material from one of those initial tracks as the basis of one of our pieces. So yeah, that's quite interesting. It's moved on a lot since then, obviously, but that was the foundation for our work. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow, fantastic for getting the ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you from a sort of improvisational background, Renzo?
I am very much so. Yes. I started off my career as a drummer, playing a lot of jazz and world music.
Oh, okay.
And then I wanted to continue developing my skills as an improviser by doing a lot of solo performances, which were and still are pretty much improvised. Sometimes there's a very bare skeleton to the presentation, but most of it is kind of beefed up by improvisation instances. And then I started working with other improvisers too. So yes, that's one of the sort of my main artistic interests.
Okay. And what about you, Katherine? How did you sort of dip your toe into improvising?
Yeah, my route in was actually through the Royal Scottish National Orchestra, and at one point we had it grew out of a personal development session that we did. Actually, we had a group called RSNO Alchemy. And for various reasons, that went by the way. And I was enjoying doing that kind of work so much that I wanted to continue with that. And actually, that was one of the impulses behind me taking my 6 month sabbatical and starting Nordic Viola, to give me the freedom to do that kind of work, actually. And I love doing it. I love that process of toing and froing and responding to another person. And actually, I think especially because we're a long way from each other and we meet sporadically, that way of deciding how much you fix so that you don't forget the work you've done, and how much you leave open so that there's still room for improvisation in performance. So yeah, I'm fascinated by it, and I love working like that.
Oh, sounds like you were made for each other. So going back to On a Wing and a Prayer, what has been your focus or main inspiration when you've been working together?
So I think for the project overall, I'm looking at the changing landscapes and habitats, both through climate change and also through human impact. And in Shetland specifically for me, I've been really affected by seeing what's happening with bird flu and the sadness of seeing these species struggling. So I wanted to set that into the context of the Shetland landscape, but also looking at how industrial processes and particularly building the wind farms at the moment impact on the landscape. I'm very conscious of not being a Shetlander and of not living there. So for me, Renzo will be in a slightly different position, but for me, I don't want to really take a firm standpoint on it, but what I want to do is communicate my emotion through the music and share that with Renzo. And really, I guess, kind of make that a vehicle for other people to think about how they feel about it and to be able to express that and share ideas with each other and also with us. So, yeah, that's my main focus, I think.
Yeah, what about you, Renzo, as someone who's living in Shetland?
Yeah, just to add to what Katherine has just said, obviously from my point of view, it's this lived experience of seeing a certain dramatic change in the landscape, or especially over the past few months, which coincided with us increasing our focus on this project. So a lot of the work is actually a reflection on what is happening, and the pieces in themselves are becoming reflective pieces for people to sort of think from their own angle rather than to feed a message to them. What our sentiments might be about quite a few different issues. I do spend a lot of time outdoors. That's part of my creative process, and I can listen to what's happening around, the sort of even the divide in opinion of what people think, what people feel. And I think all that is feeding into the music that we're playing, the dynamic that we're trying to create, and the whole aesthetic of the project itself.
I think it's important to say as well that it's not all doom and gloom either. I think we very much want to celebrate what a beautiful place Shetland is. And in fact, we start the programme of music with a very peaceful piece actually that we've called Serenity, that really just situates you in the landscape and hopefully makes you focus on what is beautiful and what's special about Shetland, and also to realise that we can do something about what's happening and to think about our place as humans really in nature. So there's a lot of beauty in the music, I hope, as well.
Yes, absolutely, because Shetland is such a beautiful and very particular place. I mean, it gives you all the time that you want to engage with the natural environment around you and take that as your inspirational tool.
So I guess what people might be wondering is, how do you actually go about creating this music collaboratively? You know, I know you say you improvise and things, but you get into a room, you sit down, you get the viola out the case, and then how does that turn into an 8-minute piece?
That's the hardest bit, I think, actually, just getting the viola out of the case, sitting down and thinking, how do I start this? I would say that's really just the first session that it feels like that. And from memory, I think the first thing that Renzo gave me in when we improvised live was just a simple C drone. It's like, okay, where do I go from there? But actually, that was really nice, because that gave me a chance just to play what I wanted to play, actually, and then to start working out from that. And I suppose, I mean, I think it's fair to say, Renzo, isn't it? It was very much a sort of feeding in and out process that, you know, sometimes we started with a theme, you know, a verbal theme of what we wanted. Sometimes the music came first, actually, and then we had a extra musical idea and thought, you know what, actually, that little improvisation we did ages ago had some of that mood in there. Can we develop that out more now that we know what mood we're trying to create? And so it just kind of gradually starts growing. And each time we met, we took recordings that we could then work on at home, think about, so that every time we met again, we moved on another stage. So it's a long process, but it's a long process of growth, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's this kind of conversational aspect, and because it's between the two of us, so the setup is not a complex one where you have like a quintet and you're trying to organize things in a way and orchestrate sort of those elements together. I think we do take our time to play, but also to talk about the material, and to listen back to what we've done and use those as reference material to where we want to go, how much space do we want to leave for improvisation elements. So even in this whole program that we'll be presenting, there are some pieces which are more structured than others, but that's a choice of ours, that there are certain moments which we thought this sounds very much like a complete piece, and I think we should present it that way. And other pieces are sort of have a looser texture and arrangement to them, and we want to keep it that way so that we keep it alive and ever changing also. So there's this interesting metamorphosis going on in the process of us playing and spending more and more time playing together.
Yeah. So quite a fluid process.
Yeah.
Well, when I've been listening, there was just so many unusual sounds in the recordings that I heard that were just like completely new to me. And if I was being honest, I wouldn't have known there was only two of you in the recording. So my question is, what tricks are you doing? What instruments are there? What techniques, you know, any electronics that are, you know, being employed to create these really rich sound worlds?
Yeah, so I think from my end, because I like to fuse electronics with live instrumentation, and because I use a certain setup that gives me multiple possibilities, I consider those as my third, fourth, fifth, and sixth hand. So you can get a lot of interesting layers going on, and even from Katherine's end, probably she'll be able to talk about this herself more, but it gives her the chance to respond to these by using certain extended techniques, coming up with certain really beautiful, unusual sounds that weave in very nicely with what I'm feeding her, manipulating field recordings or using field recordings in their purest of form and their sound textures. So there's a lot that's going on between the two of us, yes?
Yeah, I think from my point of view as well, not just seeing the viola, and actually I use the viola d'amore in some of the pieces as well, which opens a whole different sound world as well, and lots of resonance and things like that. But not just seeing the viola as a melodic instrument, but seeing it sounds almost an awful thing to say, but as an object. So, you know, I can make quite a lot of percussive sounds out of it as well. I can, you know, tap on the body. there's a friend of mine, composer in Iceland, who's actually Scottish originally, Charles Ross, but he's lived there for many decades now, and he's an absolute inspiration in the way he looks at the instrument and using lots of prepared sounds. So I've not gone as far as Charles does sometimes, but he'll stick things like feathers and cotton wool and things like this in between his strings and really make some incredible sounds. But I'm definitely using my bow in a variety of ways. So I'm not always bowing across the string as you normally would, but scraping down the string to make some quite eerie creaking sounds. There's a really lovely spooky kind of wind sound you can get from bowing the tailpiece. And then I'm using objects like, if you can imagine, like the spiky massage balls you get, that you get, and I can roll that on the fingerboard, and it's like really rapid pizzicato, but also with quite different changes of pitches. So yeah, it's a shame that we're not doing, well, people in Shetland will be able to see us doing it, but you won't be able to see these in our audio broadcast. However, I will do my best to put some pictures on the blog so that people can see what you can do to a viola really. But there's a whole sound world out there. It's not just a melodic instrument.
No wonder I was feeling duped. I would never have guessed a spiky massage ball was in the mix there.
You never know till you've tried.
No, you don't. So you've talked about the landscape and the sort of improvisation aspect. Were there any other influences that fed into the music?
I'm always very inspired by words, actually, and I've worked a lot with a poet from Arbroath called Leslie Harrison, who's also spent time living and working in Shetland, so she knows, Shetland and Orkney, so she knows the Northern Isles really well. And again, it's this process of cross-fertilisation, actually. Sometimes I've taken inspiration out of her words. I love how she quite often gives bird names across all the different languages, and that potentially gives us material to put into the electronics and to change them beyond speech and start using them as sound. But also Leslie's listened to some of our drafts of the improvisations we've done and taken inspiration for her words out of that. And we may or may not use the words literally in the music, but what we will do is present them in the programme so that people have a verbal kind of thing to respond off as well. So yeah, words are a big thing for me, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping that we'll be able to weave at least some of these words within our own work, so that they become part of our whole sound texture, so to speak. And it's very interesting to read something and you're only understanding 1/4 of it because it's coming from different dialects or languages, but it's still, there's a certain sound quality which is really interesting and which I think goes really well with what we're trying to create for this performance.
Yeah. I've also, thinking back to the title of the whole project as well, Wing and a Prayer, I've tried to find some ancient pieces of music from around the North Atlantic. Prayers, if they can be, prayers or hymns, but certainly pieces that have a reflective element to them. So I've taken an old Faroese hymn that inspires one of the melodies that I use in Serenity, and also found an old tune from Fetler in the Shetland Islands, Wynja Depler, that's in Shetland Museum, that has quite a kind of haunting quality, but also a kind of dance-like quality to it. So we're bringing those into our music as well.
Wow. So there's really something for everyone.
Yeah.
And talking about that, can you tell me about the performance? Where and when can people see it and what can they expect?
So the performance will be taking place on the 20th of September in the Boat Hall at Shetland Museum, and it'll be at 6:30 to enable people from all over the islands to be able to get into Lerwick. We want it to be a relaxed performance, actually. It's a very open space, so people are free to sit or stand as you like. We may even possibly have some beanbags if people want to sit on the floor, or you can bring your own cushion. But really, we want people to feel very comfortable. And we're also offering the opportunity for people to come and meet us and to meet our instruments before and after, and find out about how they work.
Oh, wow. Sounds awesome. And how can people get in touch with you to sort of keep the conversation going if anything sort of piqued their interest in this interview?
So the best place really is to visit my website, which is nordicviola.wordpress.com, which you'll also find in the SoundCloud description, so you can visit that. And there's a contact page there, so you can drop me a line on there. You can also find me on social media, on Facebook under Nordic Viola, and Instagram, also at Nordic Viola, and on Twitter at Kath Viola Player. And we would love to hear your ideas and also your sounds, if there's anything that particularly strikes you. And who knows, maybe a new piece of music will grow out of that as well. So really, we'd love to have that dialogue with our audiences.
Yeah, so get in touch. And most importantly, where can people get the tickets? Because I can imagine this is going to be a fantastic event, not to be missed.
Yeah, and there's only 70 tickets available as well. So so get in there and buy your tickets. So you can find tickets at eventbrite.co.uk and search on a Wing and a Prayer Shetland. And again, there'll also be details on the Nordic Viola website and a link to book directly. And I'll drop a link onto the SoundCloud description. If tickets haven't sold out, we can probably take a few on the door as well if you want to turn up on the night.
Oh, I wouldn't risk it.
I wouldn't risk it
tickets.
either. I wouldn't risk it.
Get on to Eventbrite now. Amazing. So is there anything else you would like to say to the folks out there?
No, I think just come along and witness the performance.